Hello, my AP students. This is Wendy with AP History Help, and this is the AP History Help podcast, where you will learn everything you need to know about taking AP history classes, from skills to content, from historical thinking skills to themes in history. Whether you are taking or thinking about taking AP World History, AP US History, or AP European History, this podcast is for you. Be sure to check out the episode list and the show notes to find the topics that you need help with. AP History Help is on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, where I am happy to answer your questions. There are certain themes or skills that you probably get sick of hearing about, but if you can master their meaning and how to use them when you engage with the content, you'll be in a much better position to ace the exam. For 3 weeks, we are covering the 3 reasoning processes. Last episode, episode 18, we talked about continuity and change. Today will be causation, and the third episode, episode 20, will be comparison. Before we get too far along, if you haven't done so already, make sure you go back and listen to some of those episodes, especially the ones that I'm about to say are similar or exactly like how to earn points on the LEQ. I say it each episode, but I'll say it again. They're all on demand for your listening and or watching pleasure. And the episode that will be released on May 6th is a very special one. I'm going to talk to you about the exam. It will be part review, part last minute preparation, and part pep talk. It's the RPP, Review, Prep, Pep. You'll definitely want to watch or listen to it before you take your exam. Come in, students. Take your seats. It's time for some AP History Help. Causation. Why do they do that? I mean, they could say cause and effect because that is what causation is. It encompasses both what the causes are and what the effects are. It's only one more syllable and it would eliminate considerable confusion. But you know the College Board, or at least you should by now. They like to make things more difficult. Anyway, let me reiterate what I just said. With the historical reasoning process of causation, you will be expected to include both causes and effects, unless the prompt or questions specifically only say causes or only say effects. Causation as a skill is the ability to identify, analyze, and evaluate the relationship among many historical events and developments as both causes and effects. Not all causes and effects are equally important. A key task of historians is to determine which causes and effects are primary and which are secondary. Showing persuasive evidence of causation is difficult. Many events are simply correlated, which means that they occur at the same time or one occurs right after the other, but there's no persuasive evidence that one caused the other. Have you taken psychology yet? How many times have you heard that correlation is not causation, right? Just because the Great Depression happened right after World War I doesn't necessarily mean World War I caused it. In fact, in the United States, there was no relationship. In Europe, namely Germany, where the impact of the Depression was the greatest, I still wouldn't say that it was World War I that caused Germany's economic devastation. No. It was instead the terms of the Treaty of Versailles and the unreasonable expectations of France and Great Britain that Germany be made to pay for the war damages. So be careful in identifying the difference between causation and correlation. I know It's hard to keep track of all the things you need to know in an AP history class, right? So I spent a good chunk of time trying to organize things in a way that you can reflect daily and see the big picture. I call it the AP History Success Journal, and it's available on Amazon. It is set up to be a user-friendly weekly companion on your journey to acing the AP exam. I want you to be able to focus on the important content each day, each week, the thinking skills that we cover in our class and in your AP classroom. And most importantly, you should always take time to reflect on the overall process of what you're learning, which skills you're developing. I've put a bunch of other little tips and tricks in there to help answer a lot of questions that I think you might have. And I'll put the link to purchase the Student Success Planner in the show notes. But you can also access it through the aphistoryhelp.com website, or head on over to Amazon and search on Success Planner for History Students AP, and it will be at the top of the search results. The price is low right now to get them out there, plus it's towards the end of the school year. But the value is so much more than the $14.97 price tag. I want you to have a chance to grab one before that price goes up. Gift it to a friend. Get a head start on your AP class next year. Run, don't walk, to the Amazon Add to Cart button. And if you're listening to this after I raise the price, just get in contact with me and I'll tell you how to get it for that original price. I know what your next question is. Why should we care? Or more, how does this apply to my AP history class? Often, your free response questions ask that you respond to the prompt that is going to require you to either compare, show cause or effect, or change or continuity. And as we talked about in episode 17, the analysis point of the LEQ is earned by adhering to the reasoning process that is the action of the prompt. And to add to that, you can get complexity if the prompt is asking about cause and you also talk about effects, or vice versa. So as you're reviewing for your exam, one really good way, and maybe a different way, is to look at the continual cycle of causation in each unit. All 3 history courses learn about the Industrial Revolution, so I'll use that as an example. Not only what caused it, but what were the ultimate long and short-term effects? But then continuing to what did the Industrial Revolution then cause? I would recommend creating a 4-column chart. Put your major event in the second column, things like World War, Cold War, Enlightenment, the American and or French Revolution, imperialism, and yes, Industrial Revolution. Then on the left, list the things that caused it. In the case of the Industrial Revolution, you've got the beginning of capitalism that allowed for freedom in business to buy and sell and innovate. You also have the second agricultural revolution, which meant less need for people to live on farms, so they moved to the cities. The enclosure movement, which was really the early factory model in people's homes, and those machines they created to process cotton into textiles just got too big for someone's house. Next, on the immediate right, list the effects. For the Industrial Revolution, that would be imperialism as a way to gain new sources of raw materials and new markets to sell finished products. You also have urbanization, people moving to cities. Also, a long-term effect would be the increased role of the government in democratic societies in the economy. Eventually, that is. There were also new social classes, a working class, a middle class, and changing roles of women as many took on factory jobs. And then in your very last column, think about what the Industrial Revolution might be a cause of. And by the way, this could also be helpful when it comes to contextualization. Anyway, some things that it caused. And yes, I realize that those last 2 columns may overlap, but I really want you to think beyond basic effects. take the next step. Look at the next big thing in history. For example, the mass production of weapons that fueled World War I, like the machine gun, or the development of communism and subsequent adoption of it in China and Russia, or the Soviet Union. Now it's time for Wendy Teaches History. Sit back, students. It's time for a story. You guys, I am not superstitious. Okay, well, maybe a little bit. But there was actually a time in my life that I made a conscious decision to think the opposite about the number 13. I do not have triskaidekaphobia, y'all. Huh? Oh, that means fear of the number 13. But some people do. Do you ever notice that most tall buildings don't have a 13th floor? Well, I mean, if you're counting them, you don't skip 13. But if you get in the elevator, no number 13. People are superstitious. So on April 11th, 1970, Apollo 13, yes, that's right, the good folks at NASA, all those astrophysicists and stuff, they weren't going to be scared by the number 13. Apollo 13, in an attempt to be the third mission to land on the moon, launched from right over on the other side of the Florida Peninsula from me, Cape Canaveral. 2 days later, that's right, on April 13th, Apollo 13, which was now over 200,000 miles away from Earth, was rocked by an explosion. One of the oxygen tanks had blown. It might be the first time the words, "Houston, we have a problem," were uttered. Their oxygen supply, electricity, and lights were disabled. Now, the details of how these men survived and the creative problem solving that ensued are pretty impressive. There is a link from the History Channel in the show notes, or if you've got time, I'd recommend the 1995 movie called Apollo 13. But through a series of basic brilliance with a few miracles sprinkled in, the three men made it back to Earth on April 17th. I guess it makes me a little superstitious if I say it's probably not a good idea to have a couple of 13s in the mix when you're only the third manned mission to the moon. College Board has included this reasoning process in their curriculum with specific aspects of the cognitive process as follows. Describe causes and/or effects of a specific historical development or process. Explain the relationship between causes and effects of a specific historical development or process. Explain the difference between primary and secondary causes and between short and long-term effects. Explain how a relevant context influenced a specific historical development or process. And explain the relative historical significance or different causes and/or effects. How might you encounter the reasoning process of causation, you might ask? You know, back in the day, there was actually a cause and effect essay rather than an LEQ. Now you can count on one of the three free response questions to have causation as the historical reasoning skill. So here are some examples. In 2021, the AP Euro DBQ was evaluate whether or not British imperial rule in India during the 1800s was primarily influenced by liberalism. See what they did there? You didn't hear me say cause or effect, but you did hear me say influenced by. What's another word for influenced by? That's right, caused by. In the 2019 APUSH exam, parts B and C of the second short answer question say, first, to briefly explain how one specific event or development in the period from 1800 to 1850 contributed to the process depicted in the image, Again, it doesn't say caused, but contributed to is another phrase meaning caused. Then second, it says briefly explain one specific historical effect in the period from 1844 to 1890 that resulted from the process depicted in the image. So in that case, you are given the word effect. And last, in 2021, the AP World LEQ prompt, long essay question prompt, was sneaky. It's really important that you get the right historical reasoning process here because it's how you get the analysis point on the LEQ. So listen to how it almost sounds like they are trying to throw you off the scent of the right one. The prompt says, in the period 1450 to 1750, European expansion affected the development of numerous East Asian and South Asian states. Develop an argument that evaluates the extent to which the economies of East and or South Asian states in the time period changed in response to European expansion. Did you catch that? Changed. But it's not a change over time essay. It asks how they changed in response to expansion. Masking causation by using in response to. So be very, very careful with these prompts to ensure that you know which historical reasoning they are really asking you to do. Want to see some sample responses to these prompts? I'm happy to share. Just message me wherever you like to do so. Instagram, TikTok, email, text, even the AP History Help website. I'll share a sample with you for free. Just mention free FRQ causation somewhere in your message and be sure to let me know if it's for AP World, AP Euro, or APUSH. We kept it short and sweet again this week. I hope you have a better handle on what causation is, how to wrap your brain around its presence in history, and feel more confident in being able to answer a causation prompt, whether it's a DBQ, an SAQ, or an LEQ. And don't forget about that AP Student Success Journal. I will link to it in the show notes, or just search for Student Success Journal AP on Amazon. If you're going to take another AP history class next year, buy one now while that price is still low. Hey, by the way, I would be so grateful if you would tell your friends who are taking or thinking about taking AP history classes about the podcast. I'm here to help as many students as possible to be successful in the course and on the exam. That will do it for this episode. Don't forget to come to Wendy for AP History Help. And this episode of the AP History Help podcast, it's now history.